Right. Okay. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to another proposition. Our speaker today is Kanupriya Deol, who is assistant professor with the School of Planning and Development. She joined us in 2017. She holds a bachelor's in urban and regional planning and a master's in infrastructure planning from Guru Nanak Dev University in Amritsar. And prior to joining us, she has worked on several management technique projects for several firms and also has publications in several national and international journals. Her key interests are research interests are environmental planning, urban housing, project management. And her title for today's talk actually takes us into this really uh, topical area, planning for water sensitive settlements, envisaging livable and resilient development. So, Kanu, you can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. And okay, so this research, or rather this topic, came out from attending one of the faculty development programs or a training seminar hosted by Center for Science and Environment. And recently, an abstract was accepted by the International Journal of Emerging Technologies and Sciences. So I'm yet to submit my full paper. And so this is an ongoing research. I would really like if everyone can kind of put up their critical comments and let me know if I am on the right track. So presenting the presentation. Okay. Water sensitive settlements, and so this is a rather a new concept to the Indian subcontinent. We are working towards the uh, like up till now we worked on water conservation, we worked on rainfall, rainwater harvesting, stormwater management, but this is more of an integrated approach towards the entire settlement. The scale of my work is on a settlement, neighborhood, or on a zonal level. um, Being a planner, I have restricted to the policy initiatives which can be taken up through master plan or zonal level plans. So the need emerges from the country facing a huge water stress. The 54% of Indian cities are facing extremely high water stress phenomena. It The process of, or the phenomenon of water stress is where your groundwater extraction level surpasses what is there for future. So, like the aquifers, the underground aquifers, the perennial rivers, the seasonal rivers, have they are overexploited. The quantity of water withdrawn from the fresh water or the potable water, withdrawn from the surface water or be it groundwater, has been overexploited. If a particular source is to be used for coming 20 or 25 years, it has lost the favorable amount of quality or quantity. In either case, in some cases, like in case of certain cities, the quality is lost, and in case of certain cities, the quantity is lost. So like Bangalore, the only source of water, there are two major sources of water. That is your underground water. So that's one major source of water. And over the past recent years, there's been an acute shortage of that water. So this is what we call as water stress. What happens is, more the water stress you have within the city, you have to step out of the city, you have to step outside the city dimensions, or the city MC boundaries, and venture into the local planning area boundary. to look for the new water sources. Farther the source is, like, for more the distance of the source is, more is the cost of bringing that water into the city. The what do you say? The distribution network has to be extensively laid. More is the distribution network extensively laid, more is the cost. And within that transmission from a further distance to the core of the city, more is the transmission losses. In some cities, in tier 2 cities, the transmission losses have counted up to 36% more. So if even if the quantity of water pumped up is surplus, the quantity or the pressure which reaches a normal household reduces because of the transmission losses. So the concept of water sensitive cities mainly focuses on providing the sources within the city, and so that we cut out the cost of going farther away from the city. But what happens is, one major reason of your groundwater getting depleted is, if you see the image, I've just tried to show it through an image, that in first, the top corner image, um, when you have a natural ground coverage, that means we do not have too much of concrete, we haven't done too much of development, there's not much of the built up. So through the process of evapotranspiration, 40% of water is lost, 10% is lost in runoff, 25 goes to the first aquifer or the shallow infiltration, and 25% water goes into your bedrocks, that is the main source of groundwater. Where we have 10 to 20% impervious areas, there the infiltration level reduces down to 21%, be it shallow or deep infiltration, and 20% water is runoff. Where we have 30 to 50% impervious areas, the runoff becomes 30%, the shallow infiltration becomes 20%, and more the water goes into shallow infiltration, more is the techniques of improving the quality of water, the treatment that is to be given. We have to come up with more solutions, and more cost is spent on treating the water. With planning, when master plans are proposed or zonal plans are proposed, it is the proposals are given in a very uh, on a very policy level, but the funding for those infrastructure proposals or for those development plans is a greater challenge for the implementation of those master plans. Having master plans is has been there for us. Cities have started coming up with master plans or even DPRs, but with the funding, is that what is the problem? We haven't yet come up with solutions which are also cost effective. So that is one implementation challenge we're having. So with these techniques, the focus is also on the funding part. And when we have, coming back, when we have at least 75 to 100% impervious areas, 55% of water is lost in runoff. And only 10 to 5% water goes into infiltration. So the runoff percentage, if you see, the more is the impervious area, more is the runoff. This water which is runoff is lost water. So in urban areas, the catchment, greater proportion of rainfall becomes runoff. We are not able to tap this water. It becomes a nuisance for the city. We have seen flooded urban flooding pictures, Jaipur, Gurgaon, and many other cities. So this becomes a nuisance rather than becoming a resource to us. Looking at this scenario, there's a need to shift from what is happening currently to a new kind of paradigm, a new kind of approach. So, where water, rather than having a single use, we need to have a multiple use of the gray water, the black water, and so there's a need of reclaiming and treat the water, and probably not for your drinking purposes, probably it is not potable water, but we have it, we can use it for other purposes, whereas like washing your cars, horticulture, and even your street washing. So the water quality, and so the first major thing is to treat water to potable standards given by CPE EEOH. And then second is, but in the new kind of approach, we have to use the right water for right use. This is something that when we talk about sustainable, or when we talk about smart cities, or when we talk about having 24/7 water supply, so the right water for right use, like there is probably no need to use clean clear water for washing your cars. Then the wastewater is another major thing, that it is not to be passed on after one use and just send it back to the environment, and dump it in the rivers or dump it in the drains, but rather take it into a loop. So, in environmental terms, this is called reclaimed water. And of course, the nutrient level of this wastewater is really, really low, cannot be used for agriculture purposes. But there are certain techniques which I'll be talking further. That is what water sensitive settlements do. There are techniques to regenerate the nutrient thing and use it for your horticulture purposes, not agriculture but horticulture purposes, because the nutrients do get absorbed. And using your using these kind of water for your other activities. Then storm water is then certain cities do not have a combined drainage system, or they have an independent drainage system. So in those cities, stormwater is still given a primary treatment and disposed of. Whereas in certain cities where we have a combined drainage system, and the city, the amount of rainfall happening is much more than the capacities of those drainage systems. So stormwater becomes a major task for the city authorities to handle. In those cases, even stormwater has to be managed in some cases where it can be stored. Now, laying a separate system for a city where just 2 months of rainfall is happening is also very, very pricey for it. It is very capital intensive. So in those cases, water sensitive techniques come in handy. Now, this is given by Centre for Water Sensitive Cities, CRC Australia. This is a pioneer institute working towards creating water sensitive settlements, be it on a neighborhood scale. So it says that there's a transition framework for every city. Every city can be categorized into these six uh, phases, and every city passes through these phases. The first being where you have excess of water, the population is low, the water sources are very readily available, be it surface, be it ground, be it a combination of two. They're very readily available. Then the second is the seaward city, where we come up with the separate sewerage systems for public health protection, because excess use of water also, and given that when you have too much at your disposal, there is a tendency to waste it. We So then comes the seaward city. Then comes the third phase, comes the drained city, where in case of Indian cities, we did not come up with the framework of having uh, rather designing that whether we want to go with a combined sewerage system or a separate sewerage system or a partial combined system. So in those cases, drainage became an issue. The natural drainage of the city was not given due considerations while planning of the land use. The land use came irrespective to the natural drainage of the city. And so in those cases, the urban flooding was a scenario which comes up in a city. The built up density of the city is inorganic in nature. Then the fourth phase comes in, where different there are different points of polluted water coming out. Of course, as the city grows, there are the activities growing, educational, be it the educational land use, be it the industrial land use. And in that case, the environmental protection becomes a top priority for us when we see that the city has marched towards an intense industrialization. Then The last, that comes is the water cycle city. Is this is the last two phases is what is the next phase, is what we need to kind of work towards, like bringing into this phase, because now major cities have reached class 1 town, class 2 towns have reached a peak where they are facing problems with uh, quality of potable water, quantity of the water that we get, water pricing and everything. So we need to limit the stress we have on the natural resources and try to use water in an efficient manner, with uh, ways to restore the wastewater, ways to kind of come up with multiple use. And the last is once when we've restored the water cycle in our city, is we come up with a water sensitive concept, that is we have adaptive use of the wastewater. And resilience to climate change is what cities are trying to focus on, that once when you restore your water cycle, there is no more excess drainage, there is no more too much energy required to pump out the water. There is not much stress on the natural water resources. So there is a perfect balance. Nothing, it might not be perfect, but there is a efficient way to kind of eliminate out the current problems. Moving on, we have so the entire concept, it is a little it's a combination of both urban design techniques and planning techniques, because it also works on the street scale, or rather than a little, because each area is individual characteristic, has an individual land use, has a different kind of users. So it varies from a scale of a street to a little, to a zone, and then to the entire city. So the whole idea is to kind of create a balance between the demand and the supply. Second is to maintain the balance between the kind of rainfall we're having and the runoff that we get out of the cities. Third would be to localize the water resource, the rather than bringing out finding new sources of water with every uh, with the change in the dynamics of the city or the city boundaries. Fourthly, we flood mitigation, and lastly, recycle and reuse the polluted water, the wastewater. And it is not necessary that your wastewater is polluted water. It is the single time water which we have used and kind of disposed of. So rather than treating it as a liability, the whole idea is to use it on a efficient manner. So then if we look at how can we achieve it, what are the various components, how in, so it's a combination of some sustainable techniques, urban planning techniques, and landscape design. An integration of all these techniques uh, leads us to managing the water cycle and then contributes towards the sustainability in urban areas. That is what we are thriving for. Our plans, our reports, our design aims and objectives, we mentioned sustainability, we've mentioned 24/7 water supply, we've mentioned green techniques, green infrastructure. So this is how we are working towards it. This is how things can be achieved. And the minute we say that we have to ensure a 24/7 water supply for our cities, provide to the standards of 135 LPCD per person. So these are the various techniques. If I pick up one or two, so it says again the same things, that the environment, keeping in mind the environment, that is, protect the surface water bodies and groundwater. It has become very crucial to protect, for to maintain that natural balance in the surroundings that we are living in, to restrict the use of certain water bodies so that it is not over exploited. But the minute we restrict, we also have to find an alternative technique to how to overcome or how to maintain the supply and demand. Then consider the economical demands. Again, coming on to the economic people, water pricing is yet what we are doing. We do not have a 100% efficient water. There are cities with water meters, and then there are cities where uh, entire society is serving on one single hand pump. So the economics of people as well as the city administration is what is to be kept in mind. Consider the social demands. There are cities with traditional water like Jaipur, tank, like they call it tankers, and they were given there, but due to the too much of development, too much of built up, we don't see that anymore. But we have to see the social and the cultural values of that place and give them indigenous techniques rather than kind of imposing certain. So this particular concept is very site specific. It has to be very sensitive towards the demands of the people and the aspirations of people, and not forcing or imposing techniques over them. And then at the same time, the techniques that we provide should not spoil the aesthetics and should contribute towards the assets of the city, with not putting up extra maintenance or operation costs for these. So if I sum up the entire concept, it says it is an approach to reduce the potential impact of the new and the existing development with respect to the surface water drainage discharge. So the first agenda is to tackle the surface water drainage discharge, and the second is to integrate and optimize the use of available water resources. So it just focuses on one thing, that we should not look for the new sources. Through our design and through our planning, we should be able to optimize what we have at our hand rather than just saying, I'm going to go buy a new one. So now working on to the principles, it says consider the receiving waters. We have to break the connection between impervious areas and areas which receive water, use stormwater as a resource, and maximize the benefit. I will explain it further. So this is what, when you have the, we says that we need to respect the sources of water. So we need to know that if your water is coming up on a, if it comes on a slope, it is coming. So upland areas, the buffering capacity is very little. It does not have too much of space to meander, and the change in the flow and the concentration, it is heavy, it is sedimented, it is under a flow. So to tap that water there, it is we'll have to construct dams, and we'll have to construct check dams. So they are smaller streams, so it's not. So we wait for the water to come into a little lowland where there is a high buffering capacity. We can store water, and the heavy metals or the sedimentation has already taken place. So depending upon the location of the site, or depending upon the location of that particular settlement, we will have to see that where is the water coming from and what kind of water is we is seeping into our, or what kind of water supply do we have available for the city. Now, separating impervious areas from the receiving waters, we when we give up our the planning considerations, so the techniques should or the design consideration should be in such a manner that your impervious areas somewhere or the other meet the areas where water can seep in. And even if there's a complete pavement, there is something called as pervious pavements. We engineers and civil engineers, they've come up with the concept of pervious pavements rather than going up with the traditional pavements. We have to come up with the areas where your impervious areas can be efficiently used as pervious areas. If not to maximum of their capacity, a certain percentage can be used. Then we have to restore the third principle says that we have to restore the urban water cycle. What comes in is not wasted, and be it forested area, which is by default a natural it is able to maintain. But the more the urban area penetrates into your forested areas, the dynamics of that place changes. So we have, over the time period, the flow of the water which was there initially, with the built up, it reduces, and we have to use methods like infiltration and irrigation to uh, preserve this runoff. Now, when we say that it has to be benefit, so there are three. It has to be benefit in all three dimensions. That is your social, economic, and environment. It just cannot fall into one dimension in this. So it might be majorly into one dimension, but somewhere any technique that we come up with for water sensitive development has to fulfill this, because merely saying that it helps the social or economic might not be possible. But then these are the three dimensions that only if it is benefiting into these three, we can approach people, or the city authorities can take up certain projects. So there are techniques which preserve the biodiversity. They they exploit the ecosystem goods and services. We are able to at the same time take up resources, and at the same time give it back to the nature. And when we talk about the environmental risks that we have, so uh, the various techniques that are used for water to create water sensitive settlements have they are they have very calculated risk towards environment, and at the same time they also work as assets to the city, rather than just being techniques for kind of protecting the water. Then it also looks at the quality of water that is being provided to the city. It protects the ecosystem. It prevents environmental degradation. It prevents, then lastly, uh, the second hand or the treated water that is supplied back to the city. It just not, it is measured with health and safety standards, and only then people are given to use that water. So again, this is another set of principles. There's like two school thought, two different. So here it says that it is a combination of your urban design, of your landscape, urban planning, and space designing. So it is not just one dimension that it is, or it's not one axis that it is moving on to. It's a combination, or it integrates all the techniques from various aspects. So um, when we talk about urban planning, it has the street and the highway design comes into the consideration a lot. The flood pathway integration, the affordable water and good services, and the open space recreation. That is what urban planning takes care of. Then, how can we achieve water sensitive urban development? Number one is your buffer strips and swales. Bioswales, these are also called as bioswales. Australian cities, it's called bioswales. In UK, it is called swales. So it is alongside the road, and it is it's small strips created, given that we have enough space around the road to remove the coarse and the medium sediments. So the sediments settle at the top, kind of given its aesthetics to the street, and it's an alternative conveyance system for the water to seep in if there is a high impervious area. The only restriction it is restricted to the mild slopes and interaction with driveways and footpaths. So we will have to separate the traffic from the road shoulders. Second is your sediment ponds. These can be created in the low-lying areas of the settlement rather than constructing them, and then in the future figuring out that like the water stands out just right outside my gate. So rather than having to make, like, just to increase my saleable area in any neighborhood or in any um, zone, just to increase my saleable area, so people generally give uh, houses with still parking in low-lying area, but or we give parks. But these parks can also have a, if parks are given in low-lying areas, it can incorporate something called a sediment pond, and the whole idea is that the coarse sediments are blocked at the top layer and the water can seep it into, and it is particularly suitable. So these can also be temporary in nature. These can also be temporary in nature, and it might not be a very long term technique, but and so the only thing is the aesthetics can be a little jeopardized because the sediment, once when the water is stagnant and is not seeping at the rate it should, so it aesthetically cannot look. And then safety, if we put it up within a park, we have to ensure that there is a proper buffer between the passive or the active area and the sediment pond. Then we have bio filtration systems. So the scale can be modified as per where. So it biofiltration generally comes up with your streetscape, can be along strips of uh, um, uh, your plants with uh, capacities to rejuvenate the nutrient value of the water. And the only thing is it is unsuitable where the groundwater is already high and the sediment may clog the filter media, and there can be inlet blockages. Then next we have is wetlands. They're small man-made, the small areas which you can take up to develop as wetlands. They the particulate and dissolved pollutants can be used. There are special kind of plants uh, which are used here, which are kind of suggested for the development of wetlands. INCAT incorporate flood retarding function, but the cost is kind of a consideration here. Then lastly, we have rainwater and stormwater harvesting. This is along with other techniques. This is along with other techniques. An area might have a combination of 3 to 4 techniques, and with rainwater and stormwater, I won't go into the details. I think everyone is much aware of what generally happen. It can happen from a building level to and but it becomes difficult to judge the kind of storage that we have and whether for a particular zone do we will have to calculate the runoff, the kind of rainfall that is happening, the intensity of the rainfall, and then create the infrastructure. So here it is. This is uh, a complete set of techniques that can be used on a single street. So here we have bioretention area, the swales, or and also we have wetland. This is a small mini wetland that can be created. The inlet can be given on an impervious areas. So this is how we can do. But provided that the road hierarchy is maintained, we do not skip road hierarchies or be it the other, rather than just the arterial road, it can be done on your subarterials and collector roads. Now, to achieve these techniques, when talking about the intervention in different planning scales, how it can be done over in a planning scales. So, when we have our master plans, which are documented for 20 to 25 years, or the city sanitation plans and the CDPs, we no longer have CDPs. So, the water bodies, the recreation areas, the land use can be given in such a manner that in future we know that these are the areas they are more prone to having water, stagnant water. Then at zonal level, we can the location of parking lots, parks, open spaces can be used for so we need to make sure that these can be served with all the water sensitive urban development and planning measures, and establish a template for the entire zone because they generally have homogeneous characteristics. DPRs, prepare DPRs for water supply, sewerage. Then at site level, very site-specific opportunities for the on-site water-sensitive facilities, and how can we recycle and reuse this water. So if we look at the land use structure of urban centers, generally this is given by URDPFI for small towns, medium and metropolitan or large cities. So the residential cluster occupies the largest share of um, the land use, and so once when we have residential clusters, we have rooftop sidewalks, so we do have a lot of area available for the application of these techniques. It is just that we will have to come up with a very customized solutions, and unlike what we've been doing in past, uh, just give generalized things. So it has to be incorporated at master plan level and designed at a DPR level. So this is what an existing water sensitive neighborhood look like, and where your collector roads or your access roads has bio infilters, has permeate from an impermeable roadway to we have permeable roadways and services with the sustainable drainage systems, which in terms of water sensitive development is called SUDS. So, where we talk about giving bioswales along the roadside and inlet channels for water to penetrate in. This is what a commercial area can look like, and this is again given by CRC, which has to be accommodated as per the Indian aspects of market, the Indian aspects of commercial areas, where we talk about where the rainwater from both roofs and the car park are stored underground for reuse, and the quantity of the water that has to be collected has to be measured, that how, and we also have to it also emphasizes that, let's say if we are collecting 100 mld of rainwater, so where will we reuse? Because storing that rainwater is also a challenge. For over the time, storing that rainwater is also a challenge. So it says that we have to calculate, and also at the same time, how is that water going to be disposed? There has to be a balance between that. And this is how, so once when we integrate your residential, your commercial areas, and with institutional areas, it says um, it, I have yet not come across their standards for institutional areas. So just so with the water sensitive city, so there are river corridors of your cities can be uh, uh, kept like your impervious areas around your corridors can be designed into pervious areas. The capacity of the sewer system should not be risked. It should be calculated on an actual numbers. Low water stress is what we should aim at. So this is how a water sensitive city can look like. I think the slide repeat. So coming on to the general recommendations, is these are to begin with. To go on to the specific considerations, the general recommendations what a city can come up with is the groundwater regulatory measures, then your rooftop rainwater harvesting. We can, the government buildings at least, like they can come up with these techniques. Investment in update of distribution system and metering. An average, as per the standards, an average life of any the water supply system within the city is 30 to 35 years. It is designed for 30 to 35 years, given the growth rate of the population. But we have systems which are 65 years old. They have a lot of maintenance issues. They have a lot of transmission losses. So that is something we need to update, where we can, with the help of GIS, pinpoint the areas where water leakage is happening. There are techniques which have developed. You can put water pressures meters, and we can judge. So this updation in Indian system is yet to happen. It is happening on a neighborhood scale, but on a city scale, where we have a combination of old area and the new area. This is yet to come up. Then increasing in the open areas. If I was not able, I'm yet compiling the data for the percentage of open areas as compared to the land use, the URDPFI standards and the city open areas. Uh, so we need to kind of standardize the open areas that we have, conservation of your existing water resources, and then minimizing use of the fresh water in industrial areas. Again, not use the water which can be effectively treated and used as potable water. We should not try to use it in given other techniques. So that is what I conclude. Thank you.
Thanks, Kanu. Great presentation. And I should have said earlier that this is our first proposition from the School of Planning and Development. So thank you for that too. Um, are there any questions? I'm just checking the chat. Okay, nothing here. Any questions from our audience?
I have one, Radha. This is Nidhi Dindona.
Yeah, hi Nidhi. Yeah, please.
Hi. A very elaborate presentation, Kanupriya. Congratulations for that. And
Thank you.
is this a part of some ongoing research, or you? I mean, this is.
So, okay, so, ma'am, this was a training program held by Center for Science Environment with
Okay.
collaboration from CRC Australia. So, CRC is an organization Australia where they have already implemented it in Melbourne, certain cities of Melbourne. I mean, certain places of Melbourne, and Center for Science and Environment is coming up with guidelines for Indian cities. So, this is an ongoing research by them. I attended it and kind of developed an interest in this certain topic, and so the planning intervention. So they were mainly talking about urban design techniques, and I think a day they dedicated to urban planning. So the urban planning or the policy initiatives are yet to come. They have come up with design guidelines. I'm looking at the policy initiatives.
Great. My question is, what is your take on converting water into potable water? Like countries like Singapore and other places are actually converting all their polluted water, whether it's coming from the drain or whether it's coming from in some lead rated projects we did try to segregate the water, which can be become potable, and the ones which will go into harvesting or irrigation. So, what is your view on that? Because just by putting it into the drain doesn't help. If we can make it portable, which I think when Sheila Dikshit was the PM, was the minister here, chief minister in Delhi, there were several initiatives done at Okla, but nothing came out of it. I remember somebody who was researching on this water topic, and water coming into Okla was to be converted and made portable for Delhi. But the chief minister didn't show much interest. I went through a lot of papers on that. So what do you think is your take?
Ma'am,
Because
I
countries
okay.
are coming up with solutions where they don't waste water and everything can become potable. We
What?
don't come under this water stress, and everything is. I mean, the water that we only pollute, we consume it in the same city itself. So,
Ma'am, I personally feel that the first initial challenge is, other than cities like Singapore and the cities, Indian city, the mindset is yet to be kind of convinced for people to see treated water as potable source of water. For us, it is very, very difficult, very crucial at this stage. We don't even wash our cars with treated water. The other day I was having a conversation with someone that the hard water leaves marks on my car. So that person doesn't wash his car because the water is hard. So that mindset. Secondly, the Indian cities are so individual. They have such individual characteristics. There are certain cities so heavily industrialized that we are yet not tapped the point of pollution. Once we know that every point of waste water is individual, we will have to come up with multiple techniques in one city to treat because the treatment has to match the kind of pollution, the pollutant water. So individually, so I think we can start. Potable water is something that is I think would be the last kind of thing for treated water use. Initially, we can start with using it for landscaping, the aesthetics, landscaping, street washing, and probably your other activities which the water standards don't have to be too high. So portable is a long road for us.
True, true. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Hi, Kanupriya. Really in-depth presentation. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I want to ask, see, you mentioned that you are working on the policy. And if you are working on the policy, and you right now also mentioned regarding the city, each city has its own uh, issues that need to be addressed. So, if we are talking about a policy, how do you see this policy framework? Like, do we have every policy for a city will have its own policy, or one looks at a water treatment certain guidelines, like how we have our NBC or something, and then something like that. How are you seeing this?
So, ma'am, the policy will have to be escalated with the scale of planning that we have. So, let's say if we talk about master plan level, so the policy could be one is that your different kind of land use. There is a separate template designed for a different kind of land use, like your industrial areas can have a common effluent treatment plant. So the water coming from that can be then sent to another treatment plant, like a primary treatment can be given and then go for a secondary treatment. Whereas residential areas, which directly goes into the STP and then given different treatment plants. So for that, the depending upon the now there are areas with mixed land use also, where your residential and commercial areas are, so the kind of the quantity of grey water that is collected from a residential area needs to have a different kind of template for your this water sensitive design. So the only policy initiatives are that if we have to make it cost efficient. So those are the policy initiatives that we have to give at master plan level, which can be brought up to design level on the zonal level plan. So master plan would have to give up the criteria, or we can say the major directives for your how different templates can be used for different areas. So that is what I have understood so far.
Okay, thanks.
Good morning, Kanu.
Hello, sir.
Good morning. This was good. I really enjoyed listening to it, and do remember you kind of developing this thinking from your visit to CSE's
Yes.
training, as well as the TDL program that you were
Yes,
doing,
sir.
TDL course.
Yeah.
So, I mean, seeing that this has evolved so much in your thinking, and there is a lot of clarity coming in, and of course, I am sure it will be touching several of our understanding as well, many others as well. I particularly like the argument that you are making, that you will have to think about, you will have to create system where recycling and the use of grey water will have to be integrated, and also calling for water sensitive and water intelligent urban design and urban planning. So there is great merit in doing that. I think you should develop this as a competency for yourself, as well as for the school, the three schools together, because we have skills and knowledge here, planning, urban design, and design, architecture, and also I think this will be good. This will be a good area, and I'm sure this is. I mean, I could be totally wrong, or my reading could be completely wrong. But as I see the way cities are evolving, and those phases that you said, obviously we are in a phase where we are not regarding water as an asset and as something which should be managed intelligently, wisely. So there is going to be greater benefit, because we have cities in the desert region as well. We have cities which are also getting flooded during every
Yes.
monsoon.
Every
So
monsoon, yes.
I certainly believe there is greater opportunity for us to to put this at the center of the whole planning and built environment understanding, pedagogically, practice and policy. So you must develop this further, and we will all support whichever way we can.
Thank you, sir. This is very encouraging. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hello, Kanu. Prab here.
Hello, ma'am.
Great, Kanu. Great hearing all this and seeing the interest that you have developed after attending those FDPs. It's really nice to see it.
Thank you.
I just have one observation, and if you can take it as a suggestion.
Absolutely.
What all you talked today about is at whatever methods and techniques are prevalent today in India and internationally. But would you be situating it in the context of some specific area, some specific city, to see what interventions are being done over there? Maybe initially starting with some case studies and then actually trying and developing those and maybe interacting with the local authorities to influence them to adopt these measures so that, those things can be practically seen being implemented and benefits of those can be experienced by the people. Would you be eventually developing into that aspect as well?
Yes, ma'am. Eventually, I will have to come down because it just cannot stay on a very generalized mode. We will have to come up with either I'm planning up to take one master plan and kind of appraise it in terms how it can incorporate this. So the idea is to take up a master plan with the city where data is available and we have a potential situation to deal with. That sure I will do that.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
It
Thank
was
you
good
so much.
listening to all this.
Thank you.
Hi, Tanu. Good job.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ekta here. I'd love for you to look at what our studio in second semester does, and all of these strategies are the bare minimum that we insist that we put into design,
Exactly.
and the only thing left is the execution on the ground.
The implementation is where we kind of stand on a fix.
Yes, so these strategies are literally the bare minimum, and so it all comes down to working in a collaborative way, in a multidisciplinary way, so that these become policy and the minimum standards.
Yes, this has to come on both the that is why Mama say this as how the scale escalates. The criteria for the implementation changes. We need to have both. We need to have a financial plan. We need to have a sustainability plan. We need to have design guidelines. I think what you are doing in the studio. So it's an integration of all.
And there is no question about it. No runoff can go waste. I mean, that is, zero neutrality in every public site is what we aim to do. So I encourage you to look at our second semester work. You'll get some very nice case studies to look at, because
I'll get in touch with you. I think that would be great. Yeah. I will get in touch with you. Thank you.
And I'm glad planners are looking so minutely. Really glad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ekta. Any other questions for Kanu?
Radha, can I go?
Yeah, please, Himanshu. Yeah.
Kanu, the way I see it through your presentation, there were a lot of recommendations, there were a lot of techniques that you suggested, which would fit in very well with the urban scenario, overall urban scenario. But when we actually deep dive into the cities that we have, at least in India that we have, the platforms are mixed, as in we have now nice, beautiful roads somewhere. We have very dense codified area. We have peri-urban areas. So there are various layers, there are various components within the city, and then these components together makes the Indian city that we see today. So what I feel that those recommendations perhaps may not work in the other components, may work if the ideas were to be placed in South Delhi or Central Delhi, perhaps it will work. But when we're looking at places like Sangam Vihar, Mangolpuri, uh, uh, Alaknanda area, where the density is too high,
too high.
and the problems are still the same. So problems faced by people in Sangam Vihar will be similar to problems faced by people in South Delhi or Central Delhi. So I think that there's a gap here where you as a researcher should look into techniques or look into ideas which could really relate to these areas also, and take this up as a dedicated stream, that how such dense areas
Dense areas.
can be looked into as well, because it will be easier to place this recommendation in other parts of the city. But when it comes to areas like I'll come out with this example of Sangam Vihar. So 2 years ago, the SDMC tried to discuss a firefighting plan in Sangam Vihar area, which is the part of Lal Dora area. And they completely failed because the streets were inaccessible. There were narrow streets as wide as 2.5 meters or 3 meters. So there was no other solution than to create centers or locations outside of the Lal Dora area where people can reach out to. So if that plan wasn't successful, the kind of plans that will come out for water resilient in these areas should be looked into as well. And probably that could become your contribution to this ongoing research, because if they are not looking at it, you can look into it and then
I will.
suggest them that this is what we could actually look into and do. So that's when whatever you are doing, whatever they are doing, and what your contribution will be collectively seen as a master plan for water security for the city.
Probably, I think we can intervene at a zonal level there. If like you were saying that the roads are inaccessible and we cannot have such technological. So the bare minimum can be done, that the impervious areas can be channelized to just rejuvenate the groundwater. We can come up.
There is absolutely no possibility to rejuvenate the groundwater in this massive area, because all the houses are all sharing common walls. It's impervious, and there are networks of road. Whether you take Dharavi, which is
So in that case, when I don't know, I'll read about what you are saying. We've read that one area can have surplus water. One area, let's say if the area nearby certain area can kind of do, like, it's a you have work and you have too much of work, so maybe I have less of work, I can do a surplus work. So the nearby areas can kind of rejuvenate. If a certain part of the city is contributing towards rejuvenating of groundwater, it is not mandatory that only that portion of the city is using that groundwater. So I'm doing your work, I'm doing work for you. So certain other surrounding areas can develop techniques to rejuvenate groundwater, which can be used by people here. So groundwater will be there for everyone. So the areas which have the potential, we will kind of focus on that. The areas which do not have the potential, so that is, I'm saying, so they are very customized templates, not forcing people to come up with things which are not cost effective or which are not as per their aspirations. So I'm not even saying that we'll neglect the area, but we can make somebody else do the work for them, so that they have access to the water, be it potable, be it other kind of water.
Okay.
But I'll surely read into what you have suggested. I'll absolutely look at it.
But otherwise, very, very steady flow of ideas, and the process and the way you looked at from minuscule level to larger level and trying to encompass everything. So that flow is nice.
Thank you.
So I neglected to read out the questions from the chat. So Himani has asked a question, Himani Chaudhary. Will you also be exploring water management technologies available in flooded areas? As floods are quite prevalent and almost an annual feature in Indian monsoons, especially smaller towns and bigger towns also, if I may add. Yeah. So,
So,
Kanu?
okay. Himani, if you're referring to the urban flooding, see, floods is, we have to understand the nature of floods that we have. And yes, if we are talking about urban flooding, so the whole idea is to treat that storm water, treat that water as an asset and not as a nuisance that is just being disposed. So on a very very neighborhood scale, or when you say, that is why I've kept it very loose ended and I've said settlement. We have not said city, or we have not said it to be an urban area, rural area. We have said it to be a settlement. Is that every area with the changing nature of monsoon and the changing nature of drainage and the changing nature of kind of floods that we have, we will have to come up with techniques which cater to this. So yes, I will be kind of looking into urban flood management. The whole idea is to develop this, is to cater towards urban flooding.
Okay, thank you, Kanupriya. That was in terms of, so I had missed the earlier part of your presentation for a bit, but I really wanted to know, since we all, I mean, do face these problems. So I was not very sure of storm water as you referred to, but yeah, flooding definitely as a, not as a nuisance, but how we can manage that
Yes.
water
So
efficiently and yeah.
the minute we change the idea that stormwater is not a nuisance but it's an asset to the city, that thank God we are having stormwater, thank God we are having rainfall, and let's use this water, is what the idea of the city should be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's also some suggestions and questions from Parul Munjal. So she writes, there is an initiative, Absolute Water, by a family friend, Smita Singhal. They convert wastewater to potable water. So this is a suggestion.
Okay.
And she's given the link for that, Kanu, in the chat if you want to go through that.
I will
And
thank you.
and she's
Thank you,
also
ma'am.
said, would be great to get your input for Sadar Bazaar redevelopment project, in which
Sadar
we are
Bazaar.
trying to incorporate environment-friendly measures.
I will definitely get in touch with ma'am.
Okay. And okay, some more. The presentation also by Parul. The presentation put forth existing knowledge in the field. Are there any lines of research inquiry that you are working on?
No, this is not like this was very much personal interest driven, and that and so the yes, there is an ongoing research by Center for Science and Environment, but they are working on the guideline this thing right now. But as in practical application, I'm yet to kind of discover where is it happening and can I take up a case study or something.
I think Parul had to leave for another meeting, but I'll definitely convey that to her.
I'll get in touch with her myself.
Yeah,
also.
that'll be great.
Thank
and
you.
I think another suggestion from Himanshu that, asking if you looked at City Resilience Index.
Yes, there are
as a
benchmarking
tool.
standards and indexing standards, but haven't yet ventured into that because I'm looking for a case study right now. And then I think it will be easy for me to benchmark my case study and given with the index. So Indian case study and then benchmarking it against the index given. I hope I'll be able to come up with something.
Okay, thanks, Kanu. And lots of people who have, Nidhi and Kankan, Avitesh. Lots of people. Sorry, is there a question?
Yes. I would like to get a chance to, I had put on the chat that I'd like
Yeah,
Morning,
please.
ma'am.
make some observations and see possibilities of growth in this aspect. Firstly, I think a big thanks to Kanu and congratulations for actually beginning to redefine what planners and planning can do. And I think this is a huge leap. As Ajit had mentioned, that I can smell the ideas of and designers in your presentation. There are few planning presentations that one sees that involve themselves in the ideas of urban design, landscape aesthetics, social culture that you are with. So that's a big, step forward in thinking, and I hope you would continue in that. So there are a few questions and observations I have, and we will develop it over the course of time. I'd like to talk to you individually also to see how these could develop for you. Um, firstly, my question is, when one works on water, and it's a very, very populated field at the moment, many people are working on water. So there is a sudden interest, the focus has shifted from energy to water, and there is a lot of interesting work that is going on. Firstly, I mean, I think it would be a good idea to comb through that field and use whatever is being done. And I would urge you to look at, and I've sent this link to all the faculty, to look at Dilip Dipuna's work where he looks at rivers as a way of, channelizing rainwater and not something that, just is indigenous to geography. So that is an interesting take of, to see water as wetness rather than something that flows. And therefore, the question of, the thick layer of soil that holds the water is so important because that is where what feeds the underground. Right? So holders of water was his argument, and a very, very interesting work. And also, I'd like you to look at Vishwanath's work, and he's a planner, I think, and he also talks about the social and cultural dimensions of water uses that you mentioned, and the cultural impediments of tapping into recycled water. And there are ways, there is work going on in the sense that you could irrigate fields that are not directly linked to consumption of those plants. You grow plants like mulberry trees, which, and the silkworm thing, the revival of that, from so what he calls from ship to silk. It's a really interesting project, and full of optimism and hope, which is very joyful in such dark days. The other thing, so how do you approach water is a key to the stance you will take, and I would like you to reflect on it. For you to develop your own competence, as Sajid had mentioned, that develop your own your niche, so that you can use what other people are doing, and also they can use what you are doing. So is water H2O? Is water a cleanser? Is water a feeder? Is water a hydrating machine? Is water so what? How are you approaching water? And then that will, of course, open up
change.
Yeah, and I think that what is actually I would urgently ask you to look at is the mapping of the aquifers.
Mapping of the aquifers.
Yeah, the subterranean nature of water is very important, because what we are going through at the moment is what water looks like on the surface. But with this technology, we have a way of getting under the skin of the earth.
Yes.
And the bore well and all that depends on aquifers. In fact, the heritage structures like the Bauli tapped into the aquifers.
Aquifers, yes.
And then how does one replenish the aquifers? It's something that we've been doing for 2,000 years, probably. Mohenjo-daro have, bore wells and drainage systems to kind of do a kind of.
And minute the people are told the social and the cultural value of something like, so even I think they participate in those techniques which you tell them.
Bear in mind that this is something also I learned recently, that bear in mind that transportability of water was actually introduced by the British to charge for water. This was an economic strategy of making water a saleable commodity. So how and why did we go from water for all to water for sale? What was that step? And can we go back to community water?
Community water.
Stuff the water and sees that the wells are charged, and it becomes, like the tree growing in a community. You look after it, you bet, you consume the fruit, it becomes an asset for the community. So, water does not need to be transported, and
Yes.
I would urge you to exercise caution with models that promote economic activity.
Economic sustainability.
Because there are hidden agendas there of, who's going to earn this money and for what, and it's riddled with such. So I'm sure you will do that, and you're very well placed to do that. And also, I would the last point is that I would also like you to look at what signals water. So traditionally, we've had a very interesting, sophisticated science of how you can tell where the water is by looking at the plant. Actually, the plant pairs signal aquifers and how they grow, what plant grows where, and that's why there is a kind of change in the way one looks at landscape design now, because people look back wisely in it, back into landscape, because those are important signals of subterranean water system.
Yes.
And they local plants, indigenous plants have a way of interacting with the environment and are more suited to the environment. So if you could draw some threads in, and it's a fascinating area. Absolutely.
Sure.
All the best, and we're here to help. So anytime.
So I think this
lots of
is. I would absolutely. I think I've just got a way forward, and now I have something to look forward and start with all this. I was just working in my closed niche, and I think now I have a lot to look forward. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vibhuti, as always, upping the bar for all of us. There's just a quick comment, or I think question. Ekta has written whether the image that is right now, being presented, are those the spines? Are they roads or are they water courses? And she's of course.
No, these aren't roads. So it's actually satellite imagery of. So the center is of course an highway. And so it's like reclaimed land, or it is a kind of how it might look. So this is something which is totally, these are not road spines. This is like a satellite imagery of reclaimed areas.
That's exactly the point I'm making.
Yes.
So the variation, if this is a water course or a hard surface, that question is really critical, because this is going into a delta kind of thing. So
yes.
Initially they probably were water courses, and then they are now hard paved.
Yes. So this is
that
what
variation is crucial to this conversation you're having.
Yes, absolutely. That's very apt.
Thanks, Ekta. And a few more comments that I forgot to read out. So Sachin, of course, is saying from SSD that I hope these ideas find their way into city planners' research. Yes, indeed.
We are
much needed.
Striving. We are venturing into that.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Or should we close? I know I have class. Okay, I think we can call it a day. Thank you so much, Kanupriya. Absolutely fabulous presentation. And thank you everyone for joining in. And see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for the feedback I have. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hope it helps. No, Absolutely. That's the point of proposition. Yeah, thanks. All right.